Hey, everybody out there in the Boss Hole Transformation Nation. This is your host, John Broer. I hope this finds you on the other side of an amazing 4th of July weekend, the 249th anniversary of our nation's founding, and it'll be a big one next year. But in keeping with sort of looking back on history, we're going to go back to October of 2022 when we had Jason Lauritsen visit us in the Boss Hole Chronicles studios. Jason is an amazing individual. You've heard him on other programs. We had him on a 2-part program called Teach From Your Scars, but this is actually a TBC flashback to his check-in method episode that he shared with us. I'm sharing this with you now because we are finding more and more managers and supervisors are struggling to have regular check-ins with their direct reports, and Jason offers a great method. So make sure you not only listen, but check out his resources in the show notes and add this to your repertoire. Let's jump in. The Boss Hole Chronicles are brought to you by Real Good Ventures, a talent optimization firm helping organizations diagnose their most critical people and execution issues with world-class analytics. Make sure to check out all the resources in the show notes and be sure to follow us and share your feedback. Enjoy today's episode. Joining us today, our subject matter expert is Jason Lauritsen. Jason, first and foremost, welcome. It's so good to have you here.
Delighted to be with you.
So let me give you all just a little bit of a glimpse into Jason's credentials and his background. We actually got connected through a mutual connection, Dr. Matt Pepsel. And all of you, if you go back, you'll hear Dr. Matt's episode on talent optimization. Amazing information there. But what I think you're going to find so refreshing about Jason, this is somebody that's not afraid to break from the conventional and challenge the conventional, which absolutely needs to happen more these days. Jason is a keynote speaker. He's a trainer and an author. By the way, check the show notes. All of his links will be in there, including the links to his books. His management methodology is called the check-in, and it empowers leaders to build strong, caring relationships with their people to improve performance and retention. The check-in method is informed by decades of experience as an entrepreneur, corporate executive, and employee engagement researcher. Jason's teaching have been described as a secret weapon by leaders who strive to create a more engaging and human work experience for their people. And who doesn't want to do that? As I said, Jason has 2 books. They are entitled, number 1 is Unlocking High Performance, How to Use Performance Management to Engage and Empower Employees to Reach Their Full Potential. And I like this one. I think this is cool. Social Gravity, Harnessing the Natural Laws of Relationships. So like I said, go to the show notes. You're going to see a lot of stuff about Jason there. But Jason, it's great to have you here. And one of the things I'm most excited about is just the fact that you're not afraid to go against the grain. Is that a fair assessment? You're not afraid not afraid at all to challenge the status quo.
I'm pretty sure my mom would agree with you. She still has PTSD from me as a teenager, and I'm pretty sure my wife would also agree. So yeah, I think that's true. I was just actually having a conversation yesterday with someone with an HR leader, and I was saying I was an unconventional HR leader because I was an HR executive who is allergic to policies and allergic to protocols and stuff that doesn't make sense. So I think that's fair.
And let's start out with that, because a few weeks ago when you and I had a chance to talk more and do a little bit of a setup for the podcast, the one thing I took away is there is a lot of noise out there around. We're all about boss hole prevention and helping managers stay out of the boss hole zone. What we love to hear, and we're going to hear from you very specifically, what are some of the things that you offer to help managers stay away or stay out of the boss hole zone? But there is so much crap and so much noise out there that I think it's hard for people to get their bearings, or managers or supervisors or executives to understand, how do I help my people the most? Because if my managers aren't at the top of their game or really truly understand what their mission is, I'm just going to be cycling through them and never going to really hit on what's necessary. So I'd love for our listeners just to get a sense of sort of your, I don't want to say frustration, but how you see sort of the commonality of crap that's out there.
Commonality of crap. We could have a whole podcast probably just titled that. I
Yeah.
maybe stumbled onto something here today, John. I think that for me, the frustration, I think, was always, I mean, it started for me pretty early on coming into as an employee. I
Mhm.
know that when like, I still think about those early days of being an employee. I was a sales guy early in my career, and just the stuff that they would do or the stuff they would ask me to do and the way my managers would treat me or the decisions they would make made no sense. I mean, I just, and I mean, I think I'm a reasonably intelligent person, but it's like, how is this good for me? How is this good for helping me accomplish what I'm supposed to be accomplishing?
Mhm.
And then you get into management and they tell you things that are counterintuitive. If you go into, if you're lucky enough to get management training, you hear things like, don't get too close to your people.
Right.
And you're like, what? Like, why? And what I learned is like, well, because someday, probably not too long in the distant future, we're going to ask you to do some really terrible things to those people. And it's easier to do that if you don't really know them or care about them much.
Right.
And so then we're surprised when our employee engagement surveys come back and tell us that our people don't feel cared for, connected, or valued. It's like, it's all so painful to watch. And so I think there's still a lot of that. And I think the challenge and where I've dedicated a lot of my work, and in fact, when I wrote Unlocking High Performance, there's 2 chapters in there that were really a big unlock for me. I mean, it was something I had been working on for a long time, but I wrote these 2 chapters to help other people. It's really a history of management. And it was sort of helping people understand that a big reason that we are stuck where we are today and why it's so hard to manage people in a way that feels really good is because we inherited a legacy of management that was created very literally 130, 40 years ago,
Mhm.
to help human beings behave more like machines inside of production facilities, right? I mean, that was the era of industrialization. And we never really changed the model that much. And so today we still, and you still see it in organizations, we still manage people as if they're, machines
Mhm.
that just are there to produce output. And the reality that we see through all of the research we have about engagement and satisfaction and how people experience work shows us that people actually experience work like a relationship.
Mhm.
They wanna be valued and trusted and cared for and appreciated and accepted. Like, that's work is a relationship for the employee. And until managers understand that, until leaders understand that, until HR leaders start to treat and view work as a relationship, we're shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic.
Mm.
That's what a lot of our work around management has been for the last 20 or 30 years. That's why we haven't made more progress.
Mhm.
I understand you have a pretty firm take and position on quiet quitting. Does that fit in here? Can we talk about that for a minute?
It does, because I love the conversation about quiet quitting. I'm grateful for it, and, um, I have been really irritated by the a lot of the narrative or rhetoric around it. Because generally I hear one of 3 things. And actually, John, I think when we talked, like, it was one of the things that sort of happened in our conversation. But I
Mhm.
hear one of 3 things about quiet quitting when it comes up. And this usually comes from people that are either leaders or in HR or are consultants trying to do HR stuff, right? Or whatever. They say flippantly, well, it's not very quiet if they're talking about it on social media. Number 2, they'll say, "Well, they're not actually quitting, so why are they calling it quiet quitting?" And
Mhm.
then
Mhm.
number 3, and this is my favorite, they're like, there's an eye roll, and it's usually like, "Ugh, why are we renaming something that already exists? Like, we've had this for years. We call it disengagement or, mailing it in or quitting in place." Here's the problem. Here's the problem, is that the difference this time is that the phrase quiet quitting was invented by an employee. It was an employee went to TikTok to talk about that he is done with hustle culture. He's
Mhm.
done with it. He's done with sort of being expected to, like, work at burnout rates with no reward and no end in sight and no appreciation, and having no life. And so I'm done. I'm just going to scale it back. I'm going to do the minimum that's required of me, and I'm going to reclaim my life. I'm going to quiet quit. I'm going to quiet. That's where it came from. And people were like, yes, 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 yes. And these were employees. So this wasn't HR renaming it. The difference here is that in the past, right, all of those other labels, mailing it in, quitting in place, I don't know what there's a whole bunch of them.
Sure.
We gave it a formal name in HR. We call it disengaged. These were all judgy, blaming terms that we assigned to the employee. It was us looking at them saying, that damned employee is mailing it in. That damned employee isn't doing enough. They're broken. We should fix that. This is the employee saying, no. I've had enough. And the part of it that I think is so interesting. So I think if we reframe, so number one, if you we got to pay attention, because quiet quitting is a call for help. It's a wake up call. Employees are saying, this isn't working for me. And so they're not going to give you the signal to quit. I mean, and here's the thing that's dangerous. So let's break it down. What do they really mean when they say quiet quitting? Because I think it's actually exactly the right phrase. Let's start with quitting, right? They're saying quiet quitting because quitting in their mind is they're saying, I am on the verge of burnout. I can't sustain this workload, right? I've had to give up everything outside of work that matters to me, or it's suffering, right? All of these consequences. And I have decided that instead of doing that, I'm only going to meet the expectations of my job, or the amount I need to do so I don't get fired. And in their mind, they think that is quitting. That's a problem. Yeah. Number one. Number two, quiet. What quiet means in this case isn't that I'm not going to talk about it. It means that I don't feel that it's safe to talk to the people who could actually do something about it. Right? I don't have the safety. I don't have the support. I've tried to talk about it in the past. Nobody seems to care. And so here we are. I'm quiet quitting. Makes perfect sense. Quiet quitting is a failure of management. Period. And this is a moment we should be paying attention. We should be listening. Quiet quitters are not the problem here. It's an invitation for us to elevate as managers, as HR. Let's fix the core problem. Let's get about that. And that's actually what the check-in method can help you do. So I think the conversation will arc to a place that's actually part of the solution.
Absolutely. But before we get there, one of the things, Jason, that you shared with me a couple of weeks ago, which I thought was very enlightening, was within quiet quitting, people are deciding they're not going to fall victim to the hustle culture, which I think is an interesting term, and I'd like to explore that just a little bit. But I'm going to do what's expected.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to do what is required in my job, meet my expectations, and then go live my life. And you said, and I think this is really interesting, I'd love a company full of those people. I'd love a company full of people that would meet the expectations if that's what we've established. And isn't that exactly what we are paying them to do? And then where does this elevation come from? So I see. So I thought that was a really interesting perspective. Where did the hustle culture come from? I mean, is that a carryover from, I don't know, I mean, the crazy 80s and 90s where I know I was, new in the business world, or what?
Maybe. I think it is part of that. I think it's more so, I think the millennials were the first to kind of really do this. I wish my Gen X generation would have been it, but we were just busy. We just flying you the bird, right? We're going to do what we need to do, figure out how to play the game and make it work.
Right.
The generation, the millennials, and now the Gen Z, the thing that I love about them is they're willing to say the quiet part out loud. So I'm not sure that hustle culture is necessarily a new phenomenon. I think it's a phenomenon that's existed for decades. I think they have the audacity to say, this is stupid. This is not worth it. And the funny thing is, they've been living in a world where we talk about things like work-life balance and well-being, and then they're being piled a workload that's big enough for 2 people, and they're being expected like, yeah, do that, and then you can have all the balance you want.
Right.
And they're like,
Yeah.
this is not okay. And they're willing to say it's not okay. And they have social media. So if you're screwing them over at work, if it's not working at work, guess what? They can go put you on blast to social media, and most companies and leaders aren't even paying attention.
That's true.
Right? Until it's a news story. And so I think you're right. And I think the biggest problem, back to the point about the, again, so what they're saying is I'm going to do enough to keep my job. Now, 2 things about that. Number 1 is if them doing enough to keep their job is a problem for you, then you are terrible at performance management. You have
good point. Yeah.
Unclear goals. You are not communicating with them. You're not managing with accountability, all of that kind of thing. And so that's a problem. If they are meeting goals, right, and you still have a problem with that, then you have a broken culture issue, right? Because what you're expecting of them is now it's a free labor situation, which is actually, I need to be careful about this, but this goes back to your first point. I've dedicated my entire career to employee engagement. But one of the things I think is so dangerous about engagement is that Gallup back in the early days defined engagement as discretionary effort. And I think that's completely wrong. Because what is discretionary effort? Discretionary effort is work that I didn't have to pay for as your employer.
Right.
So we have this whole culture of engagement built on getting free labor out of people. And this is what the Gen Zers are saying, like, what?
I'm not going to do that.
What?
Yeah.
You pay me to do a job, and now you're pissed at me that I won't give you free labor on top of that at the expense of my personal life and other stuff that I want to do. Like, no.
Right.
And so, of course, no. And the beauty of it is when you go look at what I would encourage anybody to do is go find an article about quiet quitting somewhere, or go to TikTok and search for some of these quiet quitting videos and then read the comments, because like this struck a nerve for people. I mean, you'll hear like, man, I didn't know that's what this was. I've been quiet quitting for 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Good
it's not a
point.
new thing. It's just like, it's like, let's do something about it this time.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's fix it.
And before we get to the check-in method, because I really absolutely want our listeners to learn more about that, and I want to dig into that. I think about the young professionals, well, what I consider right now in their late 20s, early 30s, who look back at their parents who were in that hustle culture and who, I mean, worked and worked and worked. And in a lot of cases, their employers crapped on them. And they go, why would I want to do that? I mean, you're a great example of what I absolutely don't want in a career. I get that. I absolutely get that for sure.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think there's a pragmatism to all of this too. Like, right, there's 2 sides to it, because there's the side that, and it's the same conversation we should be having about DEI. It's the same conversation we should be having about well-being, right? That there's the element of the system needs to change. And quiet quitting is yet another, like, it's just a signal. The system of work is broken in many, many, many places, and the system needs to be fixed. Now, if you're in the system and you want to move ahead or around in that system, you still got to, I mean, you've got to understand the rules of the game. And so that's where, like, I, it's sort of like, what do we need to do to fix the system? Let's get about that work. Now, if I'm advising my kids or some other young professional that's navigating the system right now, I've got to also educate them about the practical trade-offs of how things are being evaluated. So there are consequences to quiet quitting in today's workplace. So if you choose to quiet quit, that is your prerogative to do that. But you also don't get to then be upset that you're in this hustle culture that rewards hustle and you're not getting promoted. Right? That is, and the thing that's so sad about this is it would be okay if we would just make it explicit. If these leaders would just say, it's okay, you can make whatever choices you want. Right? It's okay to say, if you just are going to come in, meet the expectations of your role, go home, like, we're good with that. We'll pay you to do that all day, every day. The promotions are going to go to the people that are going above and beyond. That is how we're going to evaluate those that are going to move up and get more opportunity because they're willing to invest whatever. And then that allows the employee to make a choice, opt in, opt out. But I think they're frustrated now because there is no opt in, opt out.
Right. I don't know about the listeners, but I know spending time with you, you're the kind of person, Jason, you feel like we've known you a long time and it's super comfortable. I just want to say, this is such a great conversation. You're the kind of person, you're easy to listen to, and maybe it's just because it's resonating. You're putting into words maybe what some of the dissonance is that I felt, but just want to say, very cool. You're very cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So it seems to me that, a direct, prescription for helping organizations create a healthier culture and pay attention to this stuff is in fact the methodology that you developed, called the check-in. Or it's these are tools. This is a system and a format that managers can use to deepen that relationship and focus on that relationship.
It is not by any accident that is the case. It's been 20 years in the making, right? Looking at the dysfunction, living in the dysfunction, studying the dysfunction, and then studying also the organizations that are getting it right, which is what Unlocking High Performance was all about. And then having this sort of aha moment that it's like, oh, it's so simple and so fundamental. When you start to understand that work is a relationship, things start to shift. You start to think and see things completely different. And then you need the tools. You need to understand it. And I think, John, I don't remember if I shared this with you, but I think for me, this all started the check-in, with the sort of the initial kernel of the check-in method that I teach started clear back when it was one of my first corporate HR jobs. I'd been hired I'd been a recruiter, an external, like a headhunter. I had run a team. I'd owned my own small company. And then that I'd left there and was looking for another role. I got hired as a recruiting manager for my first ever corporate HR job. I knew nothing about corporate politics. Back to the conversation we were having earlier about I was a bit of a bull in a china shop early in my 20s. I was shot out of a cannon. And so and I'd been in sales. And so I come into corporate HR and I get dropped into this team, and I had an underperforming team. I started just doing what I needed to do to fix it. Like my customers were my internal managers that we were supporting.
Right.
The team prior to me hadn't been, or the manager prior to me, that team hadn't been performing. So we started fixing that. But I'm having one-on-one. My boss was not a boss hole, was an anti-boss hole, and she and I would have one-on-ones every week. And every week in those one-on-ones in the early days, there would be some version of one of my peers had gone to her to complain about my behavior somehow. Something I was doing that was not appropriate or not working for them or whatever. And every week she would give me this feedback, and I would take this feedback and I would sort of be puzzled by it. And I'd be like, okay, and I'll try to do better. And then the next week, something and something and something and something. All meanwhile, I'm getting my job done, right? My performance numbers are good, but I keep getting this feedback. And it got to be pretty frustrating. And finally, one day, I just had enough of it, I guess. And she's like, another one of my peers had complained about me again. And I finally said, I said, what do you want from me? Like, what do you want from me? I don't understand. And it's a bigger conversation than that. But like what happened was that prompt cracked open a single conversation that changed everything. For whatever reason, we both knew we needed to have this conversation, but for whatever reason, we couldn't get there. She couldn't get there. Probably because she didn't want to deal with the conflict with me because I was a pain in the ass, let's be honest. And so, but we had this conversation and we got really clear. Both of us needed to make some adjustments. I definitely needed to change some things in my understanding. She needed to change how she was thinking about it and seeing it. Everything changed. Like my relationship with her changed, my performance on my job changed, my performance with my peers changed. One conversation. And this is the thing that I think that has always been with me, because when I think back about then the next 25 years of my career or whatever it's been, I look around and I see that everywhere. our inability to have these conversations that really matter is at the heart of why we can't get this right. And I think that's even well-intentioned people end up behaving like bossholes because they can't have the conversations that really matter. And that's what the check-in method is all about. And so that's what we try to teach people and help them, is how to show up in a way to have those conversations and give them the tools.
So take us into that a bit. Give us a little bit more of the mechanics, because to me, those are transformational conversations. Those are the ones where you kind of realize, I mean, that's a self-awareness moment. That's where, like, okay, I understand my need for adaptation. Maybe it's maturity, growing up, wisdom, whatever you call it. But those are transformational. And just give our listeners an idea of, how this can actually happen, because we want them to go get your book, get your resources, and learn more about this.
Sure. Well, so I'm going to give you kind of just a quick overview of the check-in method.
Okay.
And then I'll dive into a very specific tool that people can take and start using, like literally as soon as they're done listening to the podcast, to start opening up better conversations. So the check-in method, we have the 5 C's of the check-in method. We have some alliteration here. So the first is cultivation, and cultivation is a mindset shift. And this was one of the things that, to be the kind of manager that gets into these kinds of conversations, you have to shift your mindset, kind of what we were talking about earlier, from being one that you think of your job as getting the most output from your people, to thinking more of your role as a manager as more of like a farmer or a gardener, where your job is to facilitate growth. You recognize that people are naturally wired for growth and performance. And if they're not, then that means they're not getting something they need, or they're facing an obstacle that's our job, right? Meeting needs, removing obstacles. So cultivation is the mindset shift. Then we have connection, which is what you would expect. It's building authentic human connection with your people. Then there's clarity, which is really making sure that people are crystal clear in the what and the how of work, so that there is no uncertainty. Is the enemy of engagement. Uncertainty kills engagement. Uncertainty kills relationships. And so clarity is the antidote there. Then there's care, which is really the work we roll up our sleeves. People need to know that you care about them as human beings. But then there's also the work of management, which is caring for your people, which is not to be confused with being nice all the time or only doing things that keep people happy. It's about holding them accountable and having high expectations of them so that they can become what they're capable of. But then the real work, when we sort of really get into it and get our hands dirty, is the 5th C, and that is conversation. That's the heart of it. That's the tip of the spear, if you will, the check-in conversation. And this is the tool that I can give you today. You ready?
Yeah.
All right. 4 steps to the check-in conversation. So we've all heard about check-in conversations. We've been told to have them at work. That's been one of those things that's been talked about a lot over the last few years, particularly during the pandemic when people were distributed. You need to check in more. You need to check in more.
Right.
The problem is so many of those check-ins are ineffective. They're not being done well.
Yeah.
So because what happens is, number one, a lot of managers will do a check-in, something like, "So how you coming on that project?" Is that a check-in? No. That is micromanagement. That's what that is. Because if you've set clear expectations on when that project is to be done, and they know that you're there to support them, then you saying how you coming on that project is you saying, "I don't really trust that you're working on it, and I need you to prove to me that you are." So micromanagement, don't do that. That is not a check-in. So better step would be, well, let's check in on the human, right? So then we best intention, we go ask a question like this: "How are you?" Now, when we say "How are you?" what do we get?
Fine.
Good.
Fine. Good.
Yeah.
Busy, which is like, don't talk to me.
Yeah.
Right? So good intention, but a bad question. So step 1 of a great check-in conversation is you need a great question.
Okay.
And you can actually start with a pretty simple, even the question that I just asked, "How are you?" Slight change becomes a great question, from a bad question to a great question. A great question elicits information that invites a follow-up question. So
Mhm.
that's what a great question is. So here's what a great question sounds like. Sarah, how are you today? Scale from 1 to 10. 10 being couldn't be better, 1 being couldn't be worst.
Nice.
And you're going to say what?
8.5.
8.5. That is amazing. So step 2 is ask the follow-up question. So Sarah, if you and I are having a check-in, I'm going to say 8.5 is actually on the higher end than where I am. So I would love to hear about what's going on. Like, what is it that's going well? Give me a few highlights of what's been going well lately, right? You're going to start telling me some stuff, right?
Yeah.
You're like, well, my kids are what? I get to have this great conversation on my podcast, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And now I'm learning about you. This is an opportunity to build connection. I'm learning. So those are the easy ones, right?
Mhm.
Those are good. But let's say you say, I'm a 5. Now, by the way, for those that are listening right now, you don't have to do this at work. What I actually would recommend is start at home. Practice on your kids, practice on your spouse,
Great idea.
right? Because when your kids jump in the car after school, what do you say? How was school today?
Mhm.
Good.
Fine.
Fine. You're like, okay, 1 to 10. How was school today? My kids now know, and they'll be like, it was a 5. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. 5. What's going well? Talk to me about like what's the good stuff. Give me the good stuff first. And like, well, I got to like PE was fun. We were playing this, but lunch was terrible. Or lunch, and I got to see my friends at lunch. And then I'm like, okay, well, what's the gap between 5 and 10? Like, what could have gone better, or what would have gone better to get you closer to an 8 or a 9? Well, lunch sucked, and we had a pop quiz in this class, and I don't know that I did very well. Like, think all the information that just came out. Right now, we can
Mhm.
have a real conversation.
Mm.
If somebody says 2, right, that's a cry for help.
Right.
Right? You drop everything, right? Okay, what's going on? Is
Yeah.
there something, what can you talk about? Is it something that you can talk about or that you're comfortable talking about? It's like, well, this is going on or whatever. Okay.
Right.
So you ask a great question. A great question invites the follow-up. Then you ask the follow-up. 2 questions, 20 seconds, you're into something meaningful, right?
Right.
Right
Yes.
away, you're cutting to what actually matters. Then the third thing, really important, shut up.
Oh, I love this.
Listen intently. Because if you've asked a great question and then you're asking the follow-up questions, they're giving you everything you need.
Yeah.
They'll tell you where they're struggling, they'll tell you where they're winning, they'll tell you what obstacles they're facing, they'll tell you this. Whatever you hear is the stuff that matters. That's what matters that day. And then number 4 is provide support, provide encouragement, provide a way to help, or find a way to help.
And sometimes it is just encouragement, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
you may not be able to solve it, and that's not necessarily your mission, but you're there to receive and understand and hear what's happening.
And sometimes it's celebrate,
Yeah.
sometimes it's appreciate, sometimes it's all of those things. Like if Sarah rolls in and she's at an 8.5, I'm just going to let her talk about all the amazing stuff she's doing. And then guess what? As a manager, if I'm paying attention, like that was my invitation then to say, that's amazing. You are crushing it.
Mm-hmm.
I am so happy that you are on my team.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or
Thank
I'm
you.
so happy for you. Like it sounds like things are great. Like you must be so proud of your daughter,
Mm-hmm.
right? Whatever the context was.
Yeah.
And so there's lots of great questions. And I mean, that's one. I think that's the money question you can start. That works in all contexts. I call that the well-being check-in, is using how are you scale from 1 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can use it for performance, you can ask, there's all sorts of great questions, right? A state interview done well is a great check-in.
Mm-hmm.
If, it's like, John, if you were ever to leave the organization, what do you think would cause you to leave?
Mm. Oh, just
Whatever you say after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's meaningful. Yeah.
If you can't find a follow-up question to that, then you are not paying attention. And by the way, they're going to tell you the thing that is most important to them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And you better get on that. You better be
That's right.
paying attention. So this work, the thing is, it's not complicated. It's very meaningful. And the thing is, when you learn the check-in method, you learn how to be a great manager this way, you will innately become a better friend, a better parent, a better partner, a better
Mhm.
spouse, a better neighbor. Like, because it's human skills. This is relationship skills. That's all this
good.
is. And think about if you'd have better conversations or more meaningful conversations with the people that matter the most to you in your life.
Mhm.
So you should treat the people at work the same way you would treat those people. Everything can change.
And what a
No,
contrast to how we started, where, multiple generations were taught, don't get too close to your
That's
people.
right.
Yeah.
That's right.
This is flipping it all the way around. And because work is relationship.
I think our listeners, if they're managers and people leaders, should put those 4 steps on a little sticky note or note card and just bring it with them until it becomes naturally a part of how they engage in the conversation. I mean, I definitely believe people can lead from any pattern. You're a persuader, I'm a persuader. John, you're a captain. There are other people who are more private and introspective as managers and leaders. They're less dominant, slower paced, whatever. But this is a formula that if you practice it, it just would become very natural. And I
Mhm.
would not be afraid. I would encourage people, like, write these little suckers down, write these 4 things down. And even if you have to, tell your person, I'm practicing, some new skills. I want to do a better job of relating with you and making this time that we have together more impactful. So just bear with me. I'm going to look down my note card as I ask you this first question. But all that to say, what amazing tools. Go ahead, John.
And go into the show notes and look at all of Jason's resources. I mean, access them. That's why they're there. I've looked at some of the videos on his LinkedIn profile. They're great. And Jason, I love what you say about, I mean, it's simple, but it
Mhm.
has to be intentional. You just can't be lazy. Don't be lazy about the relationships of the people around you. Two of the things that we talk about keeping managers out of the boss hole zone is that if organizations don't realize that the number one role of a manager is to develop other people, that's the number one role is to develop other people. But how do you do that without dialogue? How do you do that without creating some level of relationship? And then I just had a conversation with a group of managers and I asked them, I said, how often are you meeting? What's your cadence of checking in with your direct reports? And a couple of them said, I don't have that. And I said, well, one, you should be thinking about why you don't have that. But one of the other reasons is this gentleman said, I have 16 direct reports. He said, I can't possibly get to everybody. And I said, well, that's a structural problem because I don't think anybody should have 16 direct reports. However, it's not an excuse, but it is a pretty significant barrier to being able to really cultivate those relationships. So I think there are a lot of things that organizations can do to keep managers out of the boss hole zone. But the managers that are listening right now, yes, to Sarah's point, just dig into what Jason is talking about and start to use these right away.
And John, let's make it a prerequisite to the number one role that you're saying that managers have to develop people. I think that even before that,
Mm-hmm.
as a manager, is to make sure people feel seen and valued.
Yes.
For
Right, because
sure.
like that has to come. I mean, that has to be as human beings. When I think about it, a lot of my training, when I'm training, like I can't separate the human from work. And so I tell stories about work, but I also tell a lot of stories about my family and my interactions with other people outside of work because it's relational. It's all
Mhm.
relationships. And I think about, as a parent with my kids, and when I talk to parents, it's like, what is our number one job as a parent with our children? And most parents will say to make sure they feel unconditionally loved.
Mm.
Because when you feel unconditionally loved, it sets you free. It sets you free to take risks. It sets you free to grow. It sets you free to sort of grow and become different things. And I think that lesson is still true. That's true at work. Imagine, like, that's what inclusion is really about fundamentally,
Yep.
is that I can show up to work and feel seen and valued and accepted as I am. Before I do a damn thing today,
Yep.
Mhm.
I'm already valued. I'm already seen. I'm already accepted. And boy, now we're going to make some magic because I don't
That's
got to
so good.
worry about any of that.
Yes. And because of all those things, even if I make a mistake or I challenge the status quo or I come up with a, outside the box idea, they're still going to feel the same way about me.
That's
That
right.
is psychological safety. This is
That's
so
right.
good.
Jason, man, this is awesome. I knew that when we talked, this was going to be one of those episodes. We'd love you to come back sometime. Whatever the occasion may be, just to chat more and start to challenge the status quo. But this has been such a pleasure. And is there anything you want to share with our listeners? Anything on the horizon coming up for you that people should be aware of?
We've got, well, two things that are exciting. One is a free thing that I'm going to actually give to you for those that are like motivated. We'll put a link in the notes where you can download. We have a sort of a cheat sheet that is 18 great check-in questions. So it's
lovely.
so it's just that way. I'm going to take even some of the work out of the front of it. Just pick one and have that.
Yeah.
So that's number one. You'll have
Okay.
that. The other is we have the HR boot camp. It's the check-in boot camp for HR leaders. That's coming up. So in your organization, or if you are an HR leader and you want to get kind of a download of our methodology so you can take it back and use it to coach your managers and leaders, we have a cohort of that coming up as well. And so I'll put a link for you to go check that out if you'd like as well. That's coming up in early December.
That's awesome. And thank you for your generous offer there. We'll put it in the show notes. Everybody look for that and absolutely check out the work that Jason is doing. Jason, thanks again, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. This was fun. I'll do it anytime. I'll come back anytime you invite me.
Awesome.
Well, and keep up the, management fixing, the boss hole intervention that you're doing. It's really good stuff, Jason. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. And we'll see you next time on the Boss Hole Chronicles.
Thanks very much for checking out this episode of the Boss Hole Chronicles. It was so good to have you here. And if you have your own Boss Hole story that you want to share with the Boss Hole Transformation Nation, just reach out. You can email us at mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. Again, mystory@thebossholechronicles.com. We'll see you next time.